9 days after Pearl Harbor, Congress set plans in motion that would erase 4 Appalachian towns from the map. The official line was that America needed Fontana Dam, faster and larger than anything before, to power secret wartime factories. But the price was entire communities submerged, families uprooted, and a hidden legacy written in concrete and water. Why did building victory require drowning a way of life? This is the story that history left beneath the surface. On December 17, 1941, Congress authorized the Tennessee Valley Authority to build Fontana Dam, a decision made with a speed that stunned even seasoned Washington insiders. The ink on the declaration of war had barely dried. Yet, in less than 2 weeks, the federal government had greenlit a project that would transform the most remote corner of western North Carolina. War Department strategists saw no time to lose. The nation's aluminum production was already stretched thin, with new aircraft rolling off assembly lines every hour. But behind closed doors, another need drove the rush: the Manhattan Project's secret city at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. General Leslie Groves, the Army's chief of the Manhattan Project, needed a steady river of electricity to power uranium enrichment plants. The machines at Oak Ridge would draw more power than most American cities combined. Only the Tennessee Valley's hydroelectric network could deliver that kind of output, and Fontana was the missing piece. The dam's location on the Little Tennessee River was no accident. Years before the war, the Aluminum Company of America had scouted the valley, eyeing its potential to feed their smelters in Alcoa, Tennessee. By 1941, the Fontana Agreement had handed control of the site to TVA, with Alcoa guaranteed the lion's share of the dam's electricity for at least 20 years. But as the war escalated, priorities shifted. Aluminum for bombers, uranium for bombs. Both depended on Fontana's untapped power. Construction began on January 1, 1942, just 3 weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The first trucks rolled in over muddy mountain roads, hauling in supplies for what would become the tallest dam east of the Rockies. Congressional records and Manhattan Engineer District files show a flurry of telegrams and memos, each stamped urgent, each pushing the project forward at breakneck speed. The pressure was relentless. Every day lost could mean another setback for the war effort. What few outside the War Department understood was the scale of secrecy involved. The families living in the valley, the workers recruited from across the South, even many TVA officials knew only that the dam was vital for victory. The details, Oak Ridge, uranium, atomic weapons, remained locked away in classified files. For the men in Washington, the stakes were clear. Without Fontana's power, the machinery at Oak Ridge would grind to a halt, and the race to build the bomb could be lost. The dam was more than concrete and steel. It was a wartime gamble, played at full speed, with the future hanging in the balance. Fontana Dam rose from the riverbed as an audacious answer to wartime needs, its blueprints calling for dimensions that dwarfed anything east of the Rockies. The design called for a concrete wall 480 feet high, taller than a 40-story building, and stretching 2,365 feet across the valley. The Tennessee Valley Authority's engineering corps, led by Roland Wank, drew plans that demanded not just scale, but ingenuity. To hold back the Little Tennessee River, they would need 2.8 million cubic yards of concrete, enough to pave a highway from North Carolina to New York. Every ounce had to be mixed on site, using aggregate blasted from a quarry carved out of the mountainside just 1 mile away. Conveyor belts and trucks ran day and night, moving rock from the quarry to the mixing plants, then up to the forms rising above the river. Concrete on this scale brings its own dangers. As it cures, it generates heat, enough in a solid mass to cause cracks that could threaten the entire structure. Engineers broke the dam into dozens of interlocking blocks, each poured separately, then laced with pipes for cooling water and grout. Once the concrete set, these pipes were filled and sealed, locking the dam into a single, massive unit. The solution was as elegant as it was essential, and it set a new standard for dam construction in the United States. The spillway posed another problem. When Fontana Lake filled, water would need to drop nearly 400 feet, an energy that could tear out the dam's base if not managed. Instead of a traditional spillway over the crest, engineers designed two enormous pipes, each 34 feet in diameter, to carry water through the heart of the dam and into a deflection tunnel downstream. This bold approach let Fontana handle floodwaters without risking catastrophic erosion. This was a race against time. The quarry's location, a mere 1 mile from the site, cut precious days from the schedule. The dam's width at the base, 376 feet, wider than a football field, meant that even the foundations required their own access roads and equipment. The Tennessee Valley Authority's design team worked in shifts, revising plans as new challenges appeared, always under pressure to keep the project moving. In the end, the physical scale of Fontana Dam was matched only by the ingenuity required to build it. The blueprints became reality through a blend of brute force and careful calculation, setting the stage for the thousands of workers who would soon arrive to turn concrete and steel into the beating heart of the war effort. By sunrise, the valley buzzed with movement. Nearly 5,000 workers kept Fontana's construction alive, divided into 3 relentless 8-hour shifts. The sun meant little here. Floodlights blazed through the night, turning midnight into high noon. Gravel trucks rumbled, mixers churned, and the steady drone of engines echoed off the mountains. At 3 a.m., as at 3 p.m., men and women in hard hats and coveralls streamed to the site, their breath hanging in the cold mountain air. The pace never let up. As one shift finished, the next was already lining up for roll call. The Tennessee Valley Authority piped big band music and military marches across the camp, from the cafeteria to the ball fields, even out to the pouring forms along the river. Loudspeakers barked out the start of each shift, reminders of safety and the latest production tallies. Workers recall the soundscape as a mix of Benny Goodman's clarinet, the clatter of concrete forms, and the insistent voice of the PA urging everyone to push harder for victory. Night crews became a breed apart. Some remembered the way the floodlights cast long shadows over the unfinished dam, making the valley look like a city built from steel and stone. For many, the music and announcements were a lifeline, something to break the monotony, to remind them of the world beyond the job. The schedule was punishing, but morale mattered. Between shifts, the worker village pulsed with life. Cafeterias stayed open around the clock. Recreation halls hosted dances and movies for those off duty, while the hospital treated everything from sprained ankles to pneumonia. The rhythm of Fontana was unyielding. 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The dam's heartbeat was measured not just in concrete poured, but in the lives lived at full tilt beneath the glare of the lights and the sound of the PA. Fontana Village sprang up almost overnight, a patchwork of 400 houses and 400 trailers set along muddy lanes and gravel roads. The Tennessee Valley Authority had to invent a town from scratch, carving a community out of the wilderness to shelter a workforce that swelled to thousands. Inside this improvised world, daily life pressed on against the backdrop of urgency and secrecy. Children hurried to 2 hastily built schools, while a 50-bed hospital stood ready to handle everything from workplace injuries to outbreaks of pneumonia. Cafeterias served hot meals day and night, and the business district offered a barbershop, a post office, and a general store stocked with rationed goods. Fontana was no ordinary camp. The pressure of war meant families lived in close quarters, sharing thin-walled trailers or small prefab houses warmed by coal stoves. Laundry flapped from lines strung between barracks. Women, who made up about 10% of the workforce, stepped into roles that would have been rare just a few years earlier. Some drafted blueprints in the engineering office, their hands steady over vellum and ink. Others worked as safety officers patrolling the site in hard hats, checking scaffolds and first aid kits. In a place where every hour mattered, Their presence kept the project moving and kept the community running. After long shifts, workers and their families gathered in recreation halls for movies or dances, seeking a sense of normalcy in a world built on deadlines. The sound of children playing on the softball fields mixed with the distant rumble of trucks and the ever-present hum of the dam's machinery. At night, the village glowed under floodlights, a small city in the mountains, its heartbeat measured in poured concrete and shared meals. For many, Fontana was both a home and a holding pen, safe from the front lines, but never free from the weight of the war. Even here, in the shadow of the dam, the boundaries between work and life blurred, and the sacrifices required by war became part of the fabric of daily existence. 68,292 acres was the price measured in land. The government's appraisal files listed every hillside, every creek bottom, every field that would soon vanish beneath Fontana Lake. Surveyors walked the boundaries with clipboards, marking out parcels that had passed from one generation to the next for more than 100 years. Some families traced their roots back before the Civil War. Others could point to the exact tree where their great-grandparents built the first cabin after the forced march of the Cherokee. Relocation notices arrived in battered mailboxes and by word of mouth. 1,311 families were told they would have to leave. The numbers on paper could never capture the weight of what was being asked. For some, it meant packing up a lifetime in a matter of weeks. For others, it meant the end of a community. Neighbors scattered, churches shuttered, schools closed for good. The names on the lists, Fontana, Bushnell, Forney, Judson, would soon be gone from maps, but not from memory. The ledger of loss did not end with the living. 1,047 graves had to be moved. Crews dug in silence, lifting headstones and coffins from family plots where generations lay side by side. Some markers had faded to nothing. Others bore hand-carved names and dates, reminders of lives spent in these hills. The process was careful, but never gentle. Families gathered to watch as ancestors were placed in new ground, sometimes miles away from the original resting place. There were no guarantees that every grave was found. The rising water would cover what remained. Over 60 miles of roads disappeared beneath the reservoir. Paths that once linked farms and towns vanished, leaving only the memory of wagon wheels and footsteps. The old ways between communities, worn down by decades of use, were cut off in a matter of days. Numbers from the appraisal files and relocation records tell a story of scale, but not of sentiment. For each acre, each family, each grave, there was a history that could not be measured. The valley gave up more than land. It surrendered its past so that a distant war machine could move forward. The sacrifice was counted, but never fully reckoned. On November 11, 1944, the gates of Fontana Dam finally closed. Water began to rise, slowly swallowing the valley where families had lived for generations. By January 20, 1945, the first turbines spun to life, sending electricity into the grid just as the war reached its final months. The project had cost $70.4 million, nearly $1 billion in today's money. For that sum, the government gained a hydroelectric powerhouse that would fuel the last push of wartime industry and help drive the secret work at Oak Ridge. The new reservoir stretched for 29 miles, covering 10,230 acres, and tracing a shoreline so jagged it ran nearly 240 miles. Fingers of water reached into every hollow, submerging roads, fields, and the foundations of vanished towns. More than 40,000 acres along the North Shore passed to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, transforming private land into public wilderness. On the south side, thousands more acres became part of the National Forest. The valley's geography, once shaped by generations of mountain families, was redrawn by the needs of a nation at war. Fontana Lake became a fixture of the landscape, but the memory of what lay beneath never faded. Swain County officials kept records of the promises made and the promises kept. Among them, a commitment that families would retain access to their old cemeteries, now stranded on the far shore. The federal government pledged to build a new road along the lake's north side, a road that was never finished. Locals call it the road to nowhere. For decades, the pavement ends abruptly in the woods, a tunnel to memories and grievances that have never been fully resolved. Park historians trace the transfer of land and the creation of new recreational areas, but they also record the letters, petitions, and lawsuits that followed. The dam's concrete walls still stand, holding back a lake that powers homes and factories across the region. Yet beneath the surface, the story remains unsettled, a reservoir of sacrifice, achievement, and unfinished business that continues to shape life in the Smokies. Fontana Lake still hides the outlines of vanished towns, while its dam keeps powering new demands. As energy projects reshape landscapes today, communities face the same impossible choices between progress and preservation. The memory of these submerged valleys warns us. Every leap forward leaves something behind. What we choose to remember and what we choose to bury still shapes the world we inherit. Share your thoughts below.